There's a specific kind of weight that children of immigrants carry. Not the weight of poverty or hardship, though that's often part of it. It's the weight of being the bridge. The one who translates at the doctor's office at age 9. The one who explains tax forms to their parents at 14. The one who carries two worlds on their back and is never quite at home in either one. And here's what nobody names clearly. That bridge doesn't get to just be a kid. Picture this, you're 12 years old. Your parents get a phone call from the bank. They don't understand the automated system. They hand you the phone. You navigate hold menus, speak to a customer service rep, negotiate something you don't fully understand, and translate it back to your parents in a language that doesn't even have the financial vocabulary for what you just explained. You hang up. Your parents say, "Good job," and then dinner continues. Nobody calls that trauma. But that is a level of adult cognitive and emotional labor placed on a child's nervous system that leaves a mark. This is the hidden psychology of people raised by immigrant parents, and today we're going into the parts that haven't been fully examined. Not the success story narrative, not the immigrant hustle trope, the actual psychological architecture that gets built inside these children, and what it costs them. Immigrant children don't just grow up in two cultures, they grow up performing two entirely different versions of themselves. At home, they speak a different language, eat different food, follow different social rules, and operate within a value system shaped by a country they may never have even visited. Outside the home, they code switch into a version of themselves that fits in, that doesn't get asked where they're really from, that laughs at references their parents would never understand. What researchers call bicultural identity integration is the psychological process of holding these two selves without fracturing. Some children do it well, many don't. The ones who don't tend to suppress one identity entirely, usually the ethnic one, because the cost of visibility in the external world feels too high. The tragedy is that suppressing a part of your identity doesn't make it disappear. It goes underground. It becomes shame. And that shame is incredibly specific. It's not just shame about culture. It becomes shame about your parents, your home, your food, your name. Children of immigrants often describe a phase in their adolescence where they were embarrassed by the very people who sacrificed everything for them. That guilt lives in the body for decades. Every child of immigrants knows the sentence, "We came here with nothing. Do you know what I left behind for you? I gave up everything so you could have this." This is not manipulation. It is genuine, documented, real sacrifice. These parents did give up careers, families, languages, social status, entire identities. The sacrifice is real. But here's the psychological complexity. When a child grows up with that sacrifice as the central story of the family, it creates what psychologists call chronic indebtedness, a felt sense that you can never be enough, never succeed enough, never make the sacrifice worth it. The child internalizes a debt they didn't ask for and can never fully repay. This is why children of immigrants often become extraordinary high achievers and profoundly unhappy ones. They're not chasing success, they're running from the guilt of insufficiency. The medical degree isn't about passion, it's about finally making the sacrifice mean something. The problem is that no achievement ever settles the debt because the debt was never really about achievement. It was about love and loss and a grief that was never processed. Child psychologists define parentification as when a child is given adult responsibilities that exceed their developmental stage. In immigrant households, this happens structurally, not through neglect or cruelty, but through necessity. When your parents can't navigate bureaucracy, you navigate it for them. When your parents don't understand the school system, you advocate for yourself and sometimes for them. When your parents are isolated from extended family support networks, you become the emotional regulator of the household. Erik Erikson's framework of psychosocial development tells us that adolescence is the stage where identity formation happens, where young people are supposed to experiment, rebel, try things on, fail safely. But if you're functioning as a family's interpreter, advocate, and emotional anchor, you skip that stage. You go straight from childhood to competence without ever passing through the freedom of not knowing.
The adults these children become are often the most capable people in the room, but they are also frequently the most exhausted. They default to being the one who holds things together in every relationship, in every workplace, in every crisis. They've never learned how to be the one who falls apart. That was never an available role. Here's something that gets missed in most conversations about immigrant families. Many immigrant parents express love in a language their children were never taught to read. In many cultures, love is demonstrated through provision, through working 2 jobs, through making sure there's food, through showing up to the graduation even though no one in the family has ever been to a graduation before, through the acceptance letter on the refrigerator, through the eat more at every meal. What it often doesn't look like is verbal affirmation, physical affection, conversations about feelings, or the kind of emotionally expressive parenting that Western psychology holds as the gold standard. John Gottman's research on emotional coaching in childhood shows that children who grow up with parents who name emotions, validate feelings, and model emotional processing develop what he calls emotional intelligence architecture, an internal system that helps them navigate stress, relationships, and self-concept throughout life. Children of immigrants often grow up without that architecture being explicitly built, not because their parents didn't love them, but because their parents were loved in a completely different language. The result is a generation of adults who are functionally excellent and emotionally fluent with everyone except themselves. There is a very particular loneliness that comes when you surpass your parents, when your income, your education, your social world, and your vocabulary all exist in a space your parents cannot access. You go to dinner with colleagues and code switch so fast your head spins. You go home for the holidays and translate your entire life into a simpler version. You explain your job title without the title. You describe your city without the neighborhood. You omit the therapist. You omit the partner. You omit the version of yourself that finally started to feel real. Researchers studying intergenerational mobility stress find that upward mobility, especially in first-generation children, creates a form of social disconnection that isn't poverty and isn't privilege. It's the gap between worlds. And navigating that gap, alone, for decades, is its own kind of quiet grief. These are the people who feel like strangers at family dinners and imposters at work dinners, who feel most themselves in the presence of other immigrant kids who just get it without needing explanation.
Here's where it turns. The research on resilience in children of immigrants is actually remarkable. Studies from the immigrant paradox literature, a well-documented finding in psychology, show that first-generation immigrant children often have better mental health outcomes than their third-generation counterparts, despite more objective hardship. The reason? Tight family cohesion, shared purpose, a clear narrative of meaning, cultural identity as a buffer against adversity. The problem isn't the immigrant experience itself. The problem is when the adaptive strategies that helped you survive childhood become the default operating system of your adult life. Hypervigilance was useful when you needed to read every adult in the room. It becomes anxiety disorder when you can't turn it off in safe spaces. The shift happens when people stop treating their childhood as a series of deficits to overcome and start reading it as a specific kind of intelligence. The ability to hold 2 realities at once is not a burden, it's cognitive flexibility that most people never develop. The skill of navigating institutions that weren't built for you is not damage, it's a form of social acuity that becomes profound in the right context. The work is not undoing what immigrant childhood made you. The work is deciding for the first time which parts of it you want to keep.